So last week, Nintendo finally announced the Switch 2, and as you probably know, I was very, very, very excited for this. I live streamed my reaction with my wife, and it was wonderful. It was probably the best direct ever, I would say. In terms of first-party games, it was a little lacking. There weren't a ton of them, but there were amazing ones like Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza looked awesome, and some really interesting ideas with Drag and Drive. So very cool stuff. And then, the third party stuff is what really made it special. Like, I'm not actually going to play a lot of those games, but the thing is, there's so many and so relevant still. Elden Ring, coming out soon with games like Elden Ring, an exclusive from Soft game with Duskwoods, and Street Fighter 6, Cyberpunk 2077. And, there's so many games that were shown off that you would never expect to see on a Nintendo platform, I feel like. And it was awesome. But it feels like that Direct was dragged down by what came afterwards, or by what wasn't included in the Direct, which was pricing information. Nintendo made no mention of pricing during the Switch 2 Direct. And after the Direct ended, people were scrambling to find more information about it. And what's been found in the days since has not been super positively received. I feel like a lot of the outrage that's come out after the Switch 2 Direct has been way overblown, but Nintendo is definitely making a few mistakes. So I kind of wanted to go over everything price related to the Switch 2 and try to figure out like what actually is outrageous about the pricing that Nintendo is applying with the Switch 2 now. So let's get right into it, and let's start with the console itself. So some people are upset that the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to cost $450 or $449. And that is somewhat understandable at first. I mean, it is a 50% increase over the original Switch, and that's not a small amount. But I think the Nintendo Switch 2 is still fairly reasonably priced compared to the competition, and in terms of what it offers. So if you take the Steam Deck, which is often talked about as this great deal in gaming and being very competitively priced, the Nintendo Switch 2 is $50 more than the base level. So the Steam Deck starts at $399 and the Switch 2 starts at $449. But the Switch 2 has a bigger display at a higher resolution, which is 1920 by 1080 instead of 1280 by 800. It has 120 Hz refresh rate and supports 120 FPS. While the Steam Deck LCD, the base model, does not go past 60. It has variable refresh rate. It has HDR support, which the Steam Deck LCD also doesn't have. And then you have things like it's got the detachable Joy-Con, which the Steam Deck doesn't have. So if you want to play it on a bigger screen, you need a separate controller. Or it doesn't have, it comes with a dock included, which the Steam Deck also doesn't have. So you can hook it up to a TV. So when you take all these elements considered, and also the fact that the Switch 2 is more powerful than the Steam Deck, and it has the LSS, which the Steam Deck doesn't support and is never going to support because it's made by AMD, the Switch 2 has a lot of advantages, and it's $50 more, which is completely reasonable. Like, the Switch 2 is competing with handhelds that are probably way more expensive than it. Like, the Steam Deck is the cheapest of the PC gaming handhelds. All the other ones are in like the $600 range or higher. So the Switch 2 is not poorly positioned from a hardware perspective in terms of pricing. And I think that part has definitely been way overblown, and Nintendo is offering a good deal. I feel like a lot of people wanted Nintendo to make a more powerful handheld, and they kept talking about how the Switch was embarrassing compared to PC gaming handhelds now. And now they're complaining that it's too expensive. Like, you can't really have both of these at the same time. So yeah, the price increase can suck a little bit, but I think for what Nintendo is offering here, it is actually a very reasonable price, and I think it's gonna be great. The problem lies in the next part, the games. So we were expecting Nintendo to sort of follow the industry standard. Nintendo has been charging $60 for most of their games, but Sony and Microsoft, the games on those platforms usually cost $70, and we expected the Switch 2 to fall in line with that. But Nintendo went further, and with Mario Kart World, which is the big flagship title, the game is going to cost $80 if you want to buy it separately. And here in Europe, it's actually more physically, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So $80 is unprecedented in the modern era of gaming, and it's really strange to see Nintendo be the first one to do it, because they usually have lagged behind, like they did with the Switch. It was $10 less. And I think the Wii U, a lot of them were $50 when the competition was 60. Nintendo's usually charged a little bit less than the competition in terms of games. So it is weird to see them break new ground in charging $80. And it's something that's really hard to justify just out of the gate. The thing is, you have a game, it may have a lot of content, but it kind of begs the question, like, how much is content worth? Like, how do you justify charging more for more content? Because you have a game like the Zelda Breath of the Wild, that was $60. You had people saying that it should have been $100 because of how big it was. Maybe it should have, but would people have actually paid that much? I kind of feel like they wouldn't have, not up front for sure. And then, you have Tears of the Kingdom, which is even bigger. And yeah, that was $70. But, you consider it from a different perspective. Breath of the Wild, if you want the full experience, it's $80 because it had $20 DLC. And then Tears of the Kingdom is $70, but it's way bigger than Breath of the Wild, even with the DLC. It has a whole lot more, because you have the depths, you have the Sky Islands, like there's 3 layers to the world in Tears of the Kingdom. There's all new mechanics, a whole lot more enemies, like it's so much bigger than Breath of the Wild, even in the DLC, yet it's $10 less overall, because it's really hard to sell people on this idea of paying a lot of money up front. And I think that's a big mistake that Nintendo is making, is like, even if there is a lot of content, can that really be justified? Can you really justify $80 worth of content up front? Because I don't think you're paying a price for content. I think people pay the price of games for an experience. And when you just keep stacking things on top of that original experience, it doesn't really feel like it's adding value. It's not adding to the experience. It may be adding content, but is it really contributing to some kind of positive feeling towards the game? I think that's a little harder to say. And so it becomes a little complicated there, because a lot of companies do that in a typical strategy of, yeah, they'll charge the same standard price as normal, and then they have DLC that brings the price up. But by the time the DLC comes out, people are a little more willing to go back and consume that experience again in a slightly different way. And that's why I think DLC works a little bit better than charging those $80 up front. So personally, I'm kind of hoping that, there's the Mario Kart World Direct next week, and it's hopefully going to show why this game is $80. And I think the thing with that is that it's not about showing how much content is it in the game, as I was saying. I think what Nintendo probably would want to do, and that would actually alleviate this, would be promising 1, 2, 3 years of free content updates, like meaningful stuff, adding new race courses and things like that over those 3 years at no additional cost. They can frame it as like, with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, we charged $25 for the DLC that added a lot of tracks. So this time around, we're just charging that amount up front, but we're going to deliver those new tracks at no additional cost. So more people have access to them in a way. You have this price of admission that's higher, but everyone who gets it can get those tracks later on. And maybe that would, assuage some concerns. It's still a little bit tough, but it is, I think, probably the best thing Nintendo could do for themselves right now. That being said, it is important to note that the game while it does cost $80, Nintendo seems to understand that this is not a price that a lot of people are willing to pay. And so the Switch 2 is coming out in this bundle with Mario Kart World in the box that costs just $50 more than the console by itself. And at that point, I mean, it's a no-brainer. You have to, if you want to play Mario Kart, which if you're buying the Switch 2, I feel like you probably do, there is no reason not to buy the bundle. It's $30 less. The only excuse you might have is if you really want a physical copy of Mario Kart World. And in that case, yeah, maybe it's better to pay the $80 separately. But, I think it's pretty obvious that Nintendo wants you to buy the bundle. And in that way, like, the game is very reasonably priced. Like, it doesn't matter anymore if it's got a lot of content because it's only $50. And that's a very good deal. So I do think, that makes this situation a whole lot better because, yeah, it sucks that the price is so high by itself, but you really don't have to pay that much. Nintendo says this is like limited availability, but I feel like they know very well that you're going to need to keep producing this because it's going to be really hard to get people to pay $80 for Mario Kart World going forward. But, we'll see. The next big problem in terms of pricing is the infamous Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. When Nintendo showed this in the Direct, I think almost everyone expected this to be a piece of software that would be included with the Switch 2. And Nintendo really dropped this sort of bombshell. They went through the explanation, and at the end, they dropped this little nugget. Oh, it's going to be available as paid downloadable content. And it's like, really? Yeah, and they didn't share the price for a while. They shared it in Japan, but the official American pricing took a while to come out. Now we know it's going to be $10. And that, again, is not an outrageous price by itself. And I think, it's also not a huge problem considering, like, you don't have to pay for it. Like, if you don't want it, you don't have to buy it. I think the problem here is, like, it's just the principle of it. This is a $10 game on a console that costs $450. And Nintendo is already dealing with a lot of other problems in terms of pricing. The console is expensive. We have Mario Kart World being the first game in the modern era to cost $80, in terms of the official pricing. And you have all other games costing around $70. Like, why would you not take this opportunity to get a little bit of goodwill at least, Like, you have this game, you're charging $10 for it, which is negligible, especially with the amount of people that are going to buy this, which I suspect is not very high. Why would you not just bundle this with the console? Heck, bundle it just with the Mario Kart World bundle. Like, add it on to that bundle. That's $500. Something. Give users something. Put it on NSO. I don't know, make it in one of those titles that's included with NSO. Anything like that. Like, why do you have to charge $10 for this? If it's an experience that's that small, that's only worth $10 to you, why charge for it at all? Like, people have pointed to, like, past Nintendo consoles that add bundles and said, oh, Nintendo used to do free pack-ins, which is not true. Like, the Wii Sports on the Wii, a lot of people say, oh, that was bundled with the console for free. It wasn't. Like, the Wii Sports was bundled with the Wii in Europe and North America, but not in Japan. And in Europe and North America, the console cost more than it did in Japan. Like, it wasn't bundled for free. They were just charging you for the game up front and putting it in the package. And then with Nintendo Land on the Wii U, for example, that was only included with the deluxe set that cost $50 more, and the game itself was sold separately for $50 or $60. So, it wasn't free. Nintendo doesn't do free pack-ins like that. They haven't for a really long time. But this is only a $10 game, and they do have competition. And Sony bundled the PS5 with Astro's Playroom, which was a short little game that also showcases the capabilities of the hardware. And, but it's way more fun looking than the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. So why would you go out of your way to charge $10? Just $10. It's almost nothing. Why do that? Why not just give this to the people just to get some bit of goodwill out of it, Like, just so you don't come across as super greedy, which Nintendo is doing in a few ways. Like, when you stack all of this up, like the price of the console, the price of Mario Kart World, and then the fact that this game is $10, like, why is this not included? It does not make sense. Again, it's really, really stupid. Like, it's completely senseless. But it's also not a reason to, like, boycott Nintendo or something. Just don't buy this game. Like, I suspect most people don't want it. Don't buy it. Like, if there's no value in this, Nintendo won't see that. Like, if no one buys it, Nintendo will know they've made a mistake. So just don't buy it. I think that's a fairly easy solution. As stupid as it is, it is really dumb, and I'm not trying to say, like, oh, it's fine for Nintendo to do this. But I think it's possible, and I'm stealing this quote, I think, from John Cartwright from Good Vibes Gaming. I think he said this first, like, it's possible for something to be really stupid and really wrong, but also be blown out of proportion, which I think has been what's happening. People are making a mountain out of a molehill. I think that's the expression. Like, it doesn't have to be a huge deal because you can just not buy the game, but it's still really stupid, to be clear. I don't know why Nintendo did it this way. I feel like they're probably going to have to backtrack at some point. Like, they're going to have to do something to get people's goodwill again towards them, because they're really they're being greedy in all sorts of ways. And I think doing that, like, you come out of the gate with all of these ways that you're being greedy, that's a bit of a problem. Like you need to consider public perception when you do something like this. Either do it gradually or just have something to compensate, you know? And Nintendo's really not doing that. So that's yeah, that's really stupid, but just don't buy it. Don't buy it. The third problem is Switch 2 editions, which Nintendo is also handling very poorly. So there was a lot of miscommunication. I don't want to get too much into it. You know, Switch 2 editions of games are the full versions of the games with a Switch 2 upgrade all on one card. That's been clarified since. There's no download code or anything like that. The entire experience is on the card, so you don't have to bother with downloads or anything like that. But the pricing, that's where the problems start to arise a little bit. So Switch 2 editions are being handled in two different ways. Some of them include like brand new content that's basically DLC, and for some reason it's exclusive to Switch 2. Like in some cases it's justified, like Super Mario Party Jamboree. Makes sense, it's got DLC and all the games that they're adding are using the mouse, so it's only on Switch 2. That's okay, so they're charging $20 for that upgrade. Then Kirby and the Forgotten Land, that's also getting DLC that could probably run on the original Switch, and it's exclusive to the Switch too. And that comes also with the upgrade pack that, you know, more performance, higher frame rates on that, and that's also $20. And then you have the Zelda games that are getting big performance upgrades as well, but they're not getting really new DLC per se, they're getting some small new features, and those are being charged $10 extra. So with that framing, that's totally fine. I think if you look at those upgrades as they are just upgrades, if you already have these games on the Switch, those prices are completely reasonable, in my opinion. Like, there's nothing really wrong there. The problem comes with the physical editions of the Switch 2 editions of games, because Nintendo is charging the prices for these games as if the original games are still worth their full price at launch, and then adding the cost of the upgrade pack on top of it. So you got Breath of the Wild, which launched at $60 in 2017, is now going to be available for $70 in 2025. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense, you know, to a lot of people. I think, obviously, Nintendo has this perspective where, like, they don't want their products to devalue. They don't believe their products devalue. They think their products stand the test of time. And I agree with that. I do agree that they stand the test of time. No, they see it like art, I guess, in a way, because they are. Video games are art. And if you think of it like, oh, the Mona Lisa or something, it's like, it's just as expensive today, and no one can really buy it, really. Like, it's still just as expensive today as it was 100, I don't know when it was paid, 50 years ago, whatever. Like, yeah, that is true. But you have to remember, like, there is only one of those. And they keep printing copies of Breath of the Wild. They've already recouped the cost of whatever they put into the development of that game a long time ago. So they really don't have a good reason to still charge full price for the game and then the upgrade pack on top. You know, that's a little silly. I do think it's like, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, like, they're still charging the same price on the Switch. So it's not like you're going to be spending less by buying the Switch version than the upgrade. It's the same thing in that sense, but it's still kind of a little bit silly to do it that way. I think the big problem, though, comes in with, again, Breath of the Wild specifically, because not only do you have to pay for the upgrade pack, Nintendo is still not including the expansion pass that was released for Breath of the Wild. You may not remember this because it was a relatively small one, but in 2017, shortly after launch, Breath of the Wild got an expansion pass with a lot of new content that I think was really cool, actually. That was $20. Again, 8 years ago for the DLC. And that's not included in the Switch 2 edition either. So if you want the full experience for Breath of the Wild on the Switch 2, starting from scratch, you have to buy the game for $70 and pay an extra $20 to get the DLC. That's a $90 game that came out 8 years ago. That is really hard to swallow. Like, that is, again, one of those things where, like, why do it this way? You don't have to be this greedy. You've made so much money off of this game already. And, like, why not include the DLC? Heck, if that's, like, even if that's too much, do like what you're doing with Kirby and the Forgotten Land or Super Mario Party Jamboree. where those games are getting the DLC with the Switch 2 edition, it's $10 extra, then do it here. Like, charge $80 for it, I guess, but include the DLC. At least you're shaving $10 off of the total cost of the game and DLC included. It would be something, like something. Give us anything that we can say, like, oh, at least they're doing this. Like, no, Nintendo is making all of these decisions so that there's like no redeeming factor to these prices. Like, they're charging $80 for a new game and being the first one to do it. They're charging $10 for something that really should be included with the console. And then they're charging full price for games that are 8 years old and adding an upgrade cost on top of that, and not even including the DLC that is also 8 years old. Why? Why can't you do something to make this a little bit more appealing? So something that makes it look a little less greedy. Like, you have so many avenues you could have gone to make it just a little bit better, and you took none of them. Like, you're being as greedy as possible with these prices, really. Like, it's everything you're doing here is just, you could have done something to make it a little more appealing, and you're not. Like, why are you doing it this way? Like, why can't you throw us a bone? Anything that could make this better. Why are they not doing it? I don't understand. It's really, really frustrating to see it this way, because I want to be excited for the Switch too. Like, I'm very excited for it. And it sucks that like so much of the conversation online is dominated by these topics for the things that Nintendo could have avoided and not lose that much money. So yeah, it's really stupid. Again, there's a workaround, because there's a very good chance with Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, everyone wants to play that game probably already bought it. So if you did, you just get the upgrade, like it's $10, or if you have the NSO expansion pack, you get it at no additional cost. You probably bought the DLC already too. So like, you don't have to pay $80 or $70 or $90 or whatever for these games again. That's true. But then why even do this? Just don't release them physically at that point. Just make the upgrade packs available and forget the physical editions. If you're making it, like, the only argument there would be for physical editions at that point is, oh, at least you get everything on the card, and then you can just, you preserve that. It's like a collector's thing. Like, I would like that, to have the physical edition preserved like that. But then you don't have the DLC for Breath of the Wild in the card. Like, what is the point? Like, why do that? At that point, that Switch 2 edition just shouldn't exist, because there's really no one that it's made for. So yeah, I don't I don't understand, and it's really, really frustrating to see it this way. But Nintendo's gonna do what they do. Again, the solution here is just don't buy these physical editions. Buy the upgrade packs for the games you want. If you have Switch Online and Expansion Pass, just get the upgrades for Zelda that way. But it doesn't excuse Nintendo for being really, really weird about the way they're handling this. Like, why do you need to be so, stingy with the money? Like, I don't get it. It's so much. Moving on from games, there's also the fact that accessories are also more expensive across the board. They're all costing $10 more than they did before. The Switch 2 dock is actually $20 more than the Switch 1 dock was, I believe. I think that was $90. Now the Switch 2 dock is $110. And yeah, everything's increasing across the board. I think, that sucks. Obviously, it's pretty annoying that everything is more expensive. I do think, just rising costs of everything, it's probably kind of inevitable. It just really stings with everything that we've already talked about, to have more things costing more money. That kind of sucks, but, it is what it is, I guess. I don't think everyone needs accessories, though. That's the thing. You don't need to buy accessories for the Switch 2 at launch, because you already have the controllers. Like, you can play perfectly fine without buying the Pro Controller, for example. So, it's kind of like, in that case, I can kind of just take it or leave it. I don't really care that much that the accessories are $10 more. It just sucks with everything else that's already been talked about. It's just a little bit extra, even more extra money that you have to spend, and that sucks. But, the upside is that, like, the charging grip for the Joy-Con now, it adds the back buttons from the Pro Controller. So if that's, like, part of the reason you would want the Pro Controller, you can actually just spend $35 instead of the $80 of the Pro Controller, and you get that instead. and that way you have a way to charge a Joy-Con without putting them on the Switch 2 itself. So kind of a a little redeeming thing there, I guess. But yeah, still not great. So everything is just more expensive. The final point I want to touch on is that all of this is worse in Europe. That's where I'm from. I'm from Portugal. And yeah, all these prices are worse in Europe, and that really sucks. So the Switch 2 itself is 469 euros. So instead of $449, it's 469. Weirdly enough, the Mario Kart bundle is actually a better deal here because it's 509 euros and 99 cents. So that makes Mario Kart World just 40 euros in that bundle. So that's actually a very good deal. You're saving even more money compared to the American bundle. And even more so when you consider that physical copies of games, are also 10 euros more here compared to the digital versions. So Mario Kart World physical is 90 euros, not 80. So, when you get the bundle, you're now paying 40 euros for Mario Kart World. That's less than half the price of the physical copy. So if what I was saying about the bundle being a no-brainer, that is even more so in Europe. Like, if you want the Switch 2 and you want Mario Kart, just get the bundle. It's so much better. So yeah, like that is definitely the way to go. But yeah, all the physical games, or most of them, are 10 euros more in Europe compared to North America and Japan. And that's, I think there's something going on with tariffs because, again, the accessories are the same thing. Everything that's electronic in terms of accessories for the Switch 2 is also 10 euros more compared to the dollar price. So instead of $80 for the Pro Controller, it's 90 euros. Things like that. The Switch 2 camera, $50 in the US, 60 euros in Europe. And all of those accessories are like that. And I suspect there's like something like tariffs and taxes that you have to pay on electronics in Europe to import them. It's really annoying because this is not exclusive to Nintendo. Like the higher prices for physical things in Europe and electronic devices, that's not exclusive to Nintendo at all. The PlayStation 5 Pro, for example, $700, 800 euro. My Mac Mini, it costs $599 in the US. It's $719 in Europe. It varies a little bit by country, but yeah, it's always over 700 euros. So, it's a lot of taxes. The fact that we include sales tax in the price obviously affects that as well. But I'm fairly confident there's something with a lot of tariffs going on there that makes physical prices worse in Europe, and that really sucks. So, yeah, I don't like that at all. But to compensate, one thing that happens in Europe that doesn't happen as much in the US is that a lot of retailers do discounts for physical goods. Here in Portugal, I think it's not even one of the best places, but pretty much every retailer that sells video game pre-orders always have a 15% discount. So like, instead of paying the $80 for Donkey Kong Bonanza, 80 euros, I can get it for 68 as a pre-order. So it's a little bit better. It's still a big increase because if a game was 60 euros before, I could get it for 51, and now I'm going up to 68. It's still a big jump, but it's a little bit more tolerable than going up to 80, So that's an example, but other countries, I've seen other videos of people talking about this. In France, you can get Mario Kart World for 70 euros physical instead of 90, so that's a huge discount. Yeah, so Europe has higher physical prices, but retailers are also way more lenient with discounts. So if you don't want to pay that full price, just wait it out. And I've seen a lot of people say, like, even in regards to like the Switch 2 editions of like Zelda, for example, when you can buy the Zelda games for 40 something euros now, and they're expecting you to pay 80 for the Switch 2 editions. Like, yeah, the original game dropped in price over time, and the Switch 2 edition is also going to drop in price over time. So like, if that's your argument, if your argument is how long is that you can save money after waiting, then yeah, you can wait out the prices, and they will come down because Europe does that a lot. Prices, there's a lot of discounts, so that is also an option in Europe. So yeah, it's a little bit annoying, but we have our mechanisms to like balance things out a little bit. It's not that bad, if you're just comparing the prices of something that's about to launch compared to something that's been on the store shelves for a few years. Obviously, there's gonna be a disparity there, but those things are gonna fix themselves through retailer discounts. So yeah, all things considered, Nintendo is making a lot of mistakes in terms of pricing things with the Switch 2. I don't think the hardware of the Switch 2 is the problem. As I mentioned, like that is very, very reasonably priced for what it offers. It's everything else that is a bit annoying. You know, all the accessories are $10 more. Games are more expensive than ever, even more expensive than the competition. Welcome Tour should definitely be included for free. I don't know what's going on there. And Switch 2 editions are just being handled very poorly. So there's a lot Nintendo is doing wrong. And it sucks for me because, you know, I was just going on a tangent here. I am a huge Nintendo fan in a way that I think a lot of people aren't. I will justify a lot of things that they do that they probably shouldn't. And I will justify it from their perspective and try to understand them. And I've done that a little bit throughout this video as well. Where like I understand why they do certain things that may be considered greedy or not the right thing to do. But I don't think that's like a huge, you know, sometimes I don't think it's a huge deal because it's justified. And it sucks for me to have to admit that like some of these things are inexcusable and it makes you wonder, it's like, I don't know, it makes me question my excitement for the platform as a whole. I'm worried that by supporting it, I'm doing something wrong. And that feeling kind of sucks. I will say, like, I wish I could just focus on how much I love what I'm seeing. But yeah, it's a lot of things are stupid, but again, you can work around a lot of them. So just, I guess, try to do that. You know, try to remember that you don't have to spend all the money that Nintendo's suggesting that you do. You know, there's gonna be discounts. In case of Switch 2 editions, you can just go for the upgrades. There's alternatives, and but you can still call out, you know, what Nintendo is doing wrong. It just kind of ruins the excitement a little bit to see all that discourse online about how much Nintendo's being greedy. But yeah, you can voice your discontent. You can not buy things if you don't think they're worth the money. But you also shouldn't stop buying things just because, I mean, not that you shouldn't, but you don't have to stop buying things just on some principle thing. You know, if you're excited for something and you like it, you can buy it. You don't have to support things you don't like, but if there's something you do like, you can still support it, you know? So it's all about picking and choosing the things that you're fine with supporting. So I'm not going to buy Switch to Welcome Tour. I think it's stupid that they're charging for that. At least not for now, maybe later down the line when I'm more comfortable with it. Just for like the sake of seeing it. But you know, I'm not gonna buy a Switch to Welcome Tour. I'm not gonna pay 80 or 90 euros for Mario Kart because I'm getting the bundle. You know, do things in a way that shows Nintendo what that what they're doing isn't, you know, good. It's not good for their business either. And I guarantee, like, if you don't support it, they're not gonna keep doing it because that if it doesn't make them money, they don't care about it, right? So yeah, I think that that's kind of my general thoughts on that. Oh, I didn't want to touch on another subject, which is game chat. A lot of people were like upset that it's a paid service. Like voice chat is free on every other platform. You know, Discord is free. Like, why charge for game chat? And now you have this button on the controller that you have to pay to use because it's game chat and it only works if you're paying for it. Yeah, conceptually that sounds bad, but also Switch Online costs $20 a year. That's less than $2 per month. And you already get the Save Data Cloud, online multiplayer, access to Game Boy NES and Game Boy Color games and SNES games. And you get access to certain games like Tetris 99 and F-Zero 99. Like, I don't imagine that a lot of people have the Switch 2 and care about the online features like game chat and aren't already paying for NSO. So it's like it's less than $2 per month. Okay, so like if you're not already paying for that, I don't think there's a way that you could be convinced to pay for it or for anything. But I suspect most people who have a Switch and Switch 2 are paying for it. So really the impact of that is inconsequential, in my opinion. Those are my thoughts on the Switch 2 pricing. It sucks. A lot of things suck about the game pricing, the accessory pricing. The prices in Europe specifically are very frustrating. But you know, there are workarounds. There are things that, you know, make things a little bit better. You don't have to support the most greedy of Nintendo's offerings. You know, you can do it in a way that doesn't come across, that isn't as much of a ripoff. So do that. You know, go through the cheaper route. You can definitely do that. And yeah, just do it, and try not to freak out. Let's remain excited for June 5th. I'm really looking forward to getting my Switch 2 and playing my games on it. So yeah, I'm super pumped for that. I hope this like clarified some things for you or explained things a little bit better. If you enjoyed this, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.